Welcome back, everybody, to the Called to Rise podcast. Khalil is back on, and we're going to do our part 2 today. We're going to dive into more of the actual exercises. We talked about training and nutrition last time. We're going to dive more into what specific exercises Khalil kind of recommends for each body part for building muscle mass, to be clear, and kind of go from there and go down that avenue. So, Khalil, what body part would you normally start with as far as, I mean, most people are like kind of chest or legs are your two biggest probably. But what would you usually start with, and what are a couple exercises that you recommend, especially for somebody that's trying to build muscle, your beginner that's trying to get into the gym?
Okay, so so you definitely want to make sure that you hit, each muscle group. And so for most people, it comes down to really like just getting a good grip, like on about 2 to 3 exercises, like, different types of amount of exercises per muscle group. So for example, when it comes to chest, I would typically recommend some type of like variation of bench press. So it doesn't have to be barbell. It can be dumbbell. It could be some type of other, like, it could be incline, but some type of like bench press is a fairly basic movement, and it's a fairly basic movement pattern. And then maybe also something more like some type of variation of a fly or something, like maybe a cable fly, even a machine fly. But a lot of that kind of depends on where the person is at in terms of like their shoulder mobility, things like that. And then if they can do dips, now then maybe a variation of dips too. See for back, some type of variation of row. So whether that's a barbell bent over row, whether that's a dumbbell single arm row, or 2 dumbbell row. And then some type of variation of if they can do a pull up, or even a modified pull up or a pull down. That way you're actually getting like the working the lats and everything. And then
so let's backtrack for chest for a second. So what is your opinion on, well, first and foremost, I guess we should have prefaced this, and that's my fault, how important stretching and warming up is for your muscles.
Yeah.
And trying to increase your mobility and your flexibility really is kind of the foundation of working out to begin with. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously stretching, warming up, that's important, making sure you're doing right things when it comes to that. But as far as chest goes itself, a lot of stuff they say now is, your regular barbell bench press is not as good for you as dumbbell bench press. What's your opinion? What do you think? And if you're starting somebody out and you're trying to help them build muscle mass, are you starting them on a bar? And in the barbell, they're saying that more because of shoulder, right? Like potential shoulder injury, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? Do you stick with more? Do you make? I mean, I know you do both, but do you mix in both, or is it more, dumbbell is better than barbell?
So a lot of it is so for myself, I mix in both. But when it comes to clientele, a lot of it is dependent on like what their starting point is, like their skill level and all that. So with the barbell, so any type of barbell movement is going to require a certain amount of skill too, right? And so a lot of it is a learning curve. Right. And so dumbbells typically tend to be a little bit easier for people to grasp in the beginning. And there are some advantages with the dumbbell. For example, if you have a muscle imbalance, like for example, if you have one side that's stronger than the other, that's going to be easily exposed with a dumbbell versus a barbell, where you can kind of overcompensate with one side and all that.
Right.
But I think it's definitely beneficial to utilize both if you're able to. But if you have certain, if you have certain like mobility restrictions, then you definitely want to be mindful of that. A dumbbell variation would definitely be a little easier on the shoulders than the barbell. Also, like I said, if you're a beginner and you don't really have the skill and all that, then like the barbell might be a little bit more challenging and all that. But as you progress, if you have the mobility, if you've gotten a good grip on the form, then it definitely helps to utilize both. And reason I say that is a barbell will be better typically for you to get an overall more load. So for building overall strength, now you can still build strength with dumbbells and all that, but in terms of like overall loading, then like typically you'll be able to do, if once you get a grasp on the barbell, right, you'll be able to do more total weight with the barbell versus the dumbbells, But the dumbbells are also really good for you to be able to get that deeper range of motion. You get the better stretch, also the stabilizers and all that. And so that's why I typically recommend to, as you progress, to definitely incorporate a combination of both.
So for chest, why is it so important to incorporate flies? Because everybody, most, especially beginners, are thinking, okay, I need to do bench press or push-ups or incline bench press, whether it's barbell or dumbbell. But you said flies would be one of your top three things to incorporate. Why is that?
Yeah. And so like when it comes to flies and all that, it's more so if you're really trying to like get a better mind muscle connection with your pecs, right? So a lot of times people just don't have like a really solid connection when it comes to like, trying to develop their pecs and everything. So I think that doing like a variation of flies, and I wouldn't even say that it's always like necessary, but it can be really beneficial, you know what I mean? Especially since a lot of times people just have a hard time feeling the muscle that they're working, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can't match really a stretch when you're doing chest as to like a fly, how it stretches your chest out.
Yep.
And you're bringing that in and tensing up, getting the blood flow all in there on that fly. I mean, sometimes I can feel it a little bit better usually on dumbbell than I can barbell, that stretch and everything, but that's because you can go a little bit deeper.
Yep.
But with a fly, whether that's cable or dumbbell or even a machine, just that stretch is hard to match.
Yeah.
And to me, it kind of like is what like the cherry on top to like working your chest out.
Yeah.
That day, getting that full range of motion and that full stretch. But you said something that I wanted to talk about, the mind to muscle connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is something that I only recently started like exploring and actually being more intentional with the last year and a half. But when you're working out, actually intentionally thinking about that muscle while you're working it out and how different of a workout you will have when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a huge difference, right? Because not only are you you're being more mindful of what you're doing for one thing, right? And then you're also able to make sure you put more of an emphasis on the muscle that you're actually working. So like a lot of times when people are not paying attention to that, like they tend to overcompensate with like other supporting muscles. Because at the end of the day, even when you're doing like, say for example, if you're doing a bicep curl, so, generally speaking, we say a bicep curl is an isolation movement. Super technically speaking, there's technically not really a such reason as a true isolation move because there's always some type of other muscle that's involved, right?
Sure.
But we still consider movements like, the curls, the tricep push downs, things like that as isolation movements. And so it's very easy, and we see it all the time in the gym, right, for people to overcompensate by doing other movements, right? Like sometimes you see people with cheat curling, like swinging it up, swinging the weight up instead of actually, focusing on like keeping attention on the biceps. Right. Sometimes you see people using like almost more back than actual biceps.
They're like swinging forward and going back, and it's like you're watching their bicep is barely contracting.
Exactly. And,
but when you're using your mind to connect to the bicep, you feel that difference. Yep. And that's what, and I mean, at least from my experience, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm definitely using my shoulders or my back.
Exactly.
Or I'm swinging. Yep. Okay, I need to slow it down a little bit. And then, you get that you get that back into a flow. And that's something newer to me, but I think it's super important. And I've been working out since I was, 13 years old. And it's something that I just now kind of started reading about and learning about. So I think that's something that's important for especially beginners to just being able to make that connection, mind and muscle, because they do need to work together to have a good complete workout, in my opinion. Anyways, I mean, my workouts are way better than when I'm focused and not distracted, and I'm intentional about my mind to muscle.
Yep.
The workout is way better.
Yep.
I mean, I can have a 40-minute workout that's way better than an hour and 15-minute one if I'm focused.
Yep.
And my mind and muscle are working together.
Yeah, because it's definitely it's more consciously directed energy towards like what you're supposed to be doing instead of just being like kind of all over the place, swinging like you shouldn't be using legs to do curls.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But
okay, so after chest, you went to back. Now, most people, especially that are trying to gain muscle, now obviously everybody has different goals, but we're just being general to the person that's wanting to gain muscle right now. What are the best exercises for back to get that kind of V shape that like the most guys are shooting for is that V shape, back, getting that wider, thicker back. What would be the top couple exercises you would say to focus on and isolate on to really help you get that wider back?
So for me, I definitely say, like I said, some type of variation of row. So whether that's barbell row or like doing like the dumbbell rows and all that, because that's just a good foundational for building strength, for putting on like just raw size to and everything. And I mean, this is applicable to literally, like, it doesn't matter what your goal is. Being able to do a proper row is very important. It's like a foundational movement and all that. And so pretty much it comes just more than one thing at a time, right? You're building that raw strength, you're building that coordination with your posterior chain, right? And but yeah, so some type of row. So for me, like I'm a little biased towards like barbell bent over rows and everything. That and then if you can do a pull up, some type of pull up or some variation, and maybe some type of pull down. So like that movement pattern right there is really so pretty much it's a vertical movement, like vertical pulling pattern like that. So those are like some that I would say is probably like definite non-negotiables.
Sure.
If you're able to do like those movements, then definitely do those movements. Obviously there's always exceptions and things like that. We won't always take that into account. But if you're able to do those movements, then do those movements.
Okay. All right. So chest, back. What would you go to next?
So lower body, you definitely want to have some type of lower body pushing movement, lower body pulling movement, right? So for me, I say some type of variation of squat, right? Because when it comes to squats, right, it doesn't have to be, like just barbells. A lot of times people will hear like squat and they think that, it has to be the barbell. Right. Some type of variation of squat, okay? So whether that's back squat, front squat, goblet squat, shoot, even just like body weight squats to start off with, right? Because at the end of the day, the squat is what they call a primal movement pattern. It's one of the most important movement patterns of our body. So if you can squat, definitely do some type of squat and everything, because it has more carryover, like besides just building like muscle. It also builds overall coordination, and when you're doing a squat, you're literally working almost in your entire body, because your trunk has to stabilize. You're improving your posture, when you're doing a proper squat, and all that. So some type of squat is important. And then,
are you opposed to Smith machine squats, or is that fine for you as far as?
So I say you can utilize those, but I prefer to do some type of like freestanding squat because
have to stabilize more.
Exactly. Yep. Because of the stabilization component, right? So some type of like freestanding squat. So yeah, I should have specified that a little bit more. But and then obviously you want to do something for some type of hip hinge movement. So any variation of deadlift is going to fall into the hip hinge category. Hip thrust fall into the hip hinge category. So hip hinge is pretty much you're literally like when you're bending at the waist, you're loading up the hamstrings and the glutes, right? So anything that falls into that category is a definite as well. Because it's one of the best ways to work the posterior chain. So. Yeah, so some type of freestanding squat, variation squat, if you're able to do it. If not, then, obviously there's, use the hack squat machine, use a leg press, or just still work on building up to being able to do a freestanding squat. Yeah. And then some type of hamstring, glute, hip hinge exercise.
Okay, which you said the deadlift would be your
deadlift,
main choice.
Yep, so and different variations, so a lot of people have a hard time starting off with the barbell and everything. So if that's the case, you can do kettlebell deadlifts, you can do dumbbell RDLs. There's all different types of things that fall into the deadlift category.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's kind of the lower body, which I think gets glossed over a lot. The average lifter, and it's because it's hard. Yeah. And that's the thing that I've kind of learned is that, when training, you have to go for the hard things if you want to get any progress. I mean, anybody can go in there, work out for 45 minutes, get your heart rate going. I mean, it's obviously better than nothing. It's, you're still, healthier because of it. But if you're wanting to grow, if you're wanting to push yourself, I mean, you have to actually pick harder exercises as you get more experienced in everything, and building up to like the back squat. Most people don't even want to do a back. I mean, it just sounds unfun, let alone actually doing it. But you do feel a lot better once you get to the point where you're doing, it's not like you have to put, the goal isn't, for the average person to be able to squat 500 pounds.
Exactly.
If you can do 185 pounds 10 times, like that, that's
Yep.
really good for your core and for your body. So, I mean, obviously that depends on what your goal is.
Yeah.
But building up to those harder exercises, I mean, I feel like it's key to actually growing in the gym and growing your body and your mindset.
Yeah. And I will add, like, so one more thing to the lower body is some type of single leg movement as well. That gets glossed over a lot. Speaking like, not only does, like you said, lower body already gets glossed over. Now you throw in single leg movements, then that's gets neglected. I see probably like 85% of the time.
What are some
And
single leg movements? Are you talking about like lunges?
So lunges, variations of split squats. So whether that's a regular split squat, a Bulgarian split squat, even a single leg press. Single like unilateral movements or one-sided movements get neglected a lot. But I guarantee for the majority of people, you will see significant gains in in performance improvements if you start incorporating more unilateral movements, and especially when it comes to the lower body. But those are usually the ones that suck the most. So a lot of people they definitely nobody. I have not come across a single person besides myself because I'm a little psycho. But I've not come across a single person that actually enjoys doing like lunges and enjoys doing split squats. You see all those memes online, people like doing lifters trying to do Bulgarian split squats and they just cry, because like they suck. They do suck. They do. But those are some of I think that single leg movements are some of the most important movements you can do for your especially for your lower body. And then even a simpler version would be like step ups, So it's like if you can't do a lunge, do a step up, But like those, and then it's direct carryover to everyday life. You got to walk upstairs, don't you?
Right.
Single leg movements, But
because you train quite a few females.
Oh yeah, that's
quite a few women. Yeah. So, is it? I mean, I don't know if this is actually the case for you or in your experience or not. But do a lot of them come to you like, hey, I want to better shape my butt?
Oh, definitely.
So I would say that's probably a common one.
It's very common. Yeah.
What are the exercises that you use to kind of not only shape, but some of them are like, hey, I want it to be thicker and because more muscle. And shape it. What are the exercises you would recommend for that?
So for that, definitely.
That's
squats,
not for me, Khalil. I'm
You sure? You sure about that? I see you looking in the mirror sometimes at your butt. But definitely, I feel like squats definitely play a role in that. Some type of variation, once again, some type of variation of down deadlifts, and then even modified versions sumo. So for example, like a sumo squat or a sumo deadlift is going to put a little bit more emphasis on the glutes because your feet are turned out, you're pushing out on your hips are pushed out a little bit more, which forces your glutes to activate a little bit more. Obviously, the glute drive or the hip thrust is a staple. Definitely a lot of that and everything. That's literally what your primary function of your glutes is to extend your hips and everything. Yeah. And so the hip thrust help to directly target that as well. And then doing even more lateral movements, right? So whether that's a lateral step up, the kickouts, lateral glute kickouts, things like that. Those are and then some type of kickback, glute kickback, which is pretty simple to do. You can just be on all fours on a mat and doing something like that. Or those are some of the ones I would say are definitely the ones I have as staples. And then, like I said, there's a lot of variation in between those, but those are the meat and potatoes of it.
Okay. Yeah. So shoulders.
Yeah.
Every guy is looking for the bolder shoulder, the wider.
Yeah.
The wider shoulders. What are some shoulder exercises? And are you the type that mixes it in with? Do you do shoulders by themselves? Do you mix it in with chest and whatnot, or how do you kind of split it up? But what are your kind of go-to few exercises if you're trying to get that rounder, wider shoulder?
So shoulders are really interesting, right? Because shoulders fall into that category of technically being part of the pushing and pulling, right? Because you have the front, your front delts are more involved in the pressing, your rear delts are more involved in pulling, right? Yep. And so then obviously your traps are more of a pulling muscle. And so for me personally, a lot of times I end up splitting them across both, both my pulling days and my pushing days, right? So my go-to exercise is typically some type of overhead pressing movement. So that can be, a military press with a barbell. That can be straight dumbbell press. I do a lot of single arm dumbbell pressing as well. Now, I think overhead pressing is, you want to talk about neglected, overhead pressing gets severely neglected, in my opinion. You see a lot of guys, like, they'll do, chest and all that all day, but then when it comes to, like, overhead pressing, they're just kind of like, and then some type of, pulling exercise for the rear delts, right? So whether that's face pulls, rear delt flies, upright rows. So I do my upright rows either with a dumbbell or with a wide bar on the cable. And then I love doing, so a lot of times, like for me, my traps get worked by default, right? With all of my other pulling movements, like I do a lot of deadlifts and farmer carries, right? Which technically hit a lot of other muscle groups and everything, but the traps are involved in helping to stabilize that weight, right? And so my traps get worked by, like I said, by default. But yeah, so when it comes to shoulders, that's one of those things that technically you can put them on. You can make them a whole day, or if you like, if that works. A lot of it depends on your schedule and all that. Right. But me personally, I do tend to like to split up certain movements across, like, a couple of different sessions. I will say this one thing. I do think, so for a lot of people, the front delt does get overworked quite a bit because of the amount of, like, pressing and chest work that people do. Like, well, particularly mostly guys. It's usually guys, right? That's why you see a lot of guys that have that overdeveloped, like, front. And part of me, I'm guilty. I've always had really pretty well developed, like, shoulders and everything like that. So that's something I have to be mindful of, because, like, my delts just blow up just because it just happens.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that I would say over the last couple of years that I did more reading up on with shoulders and everything. And, like, sometimes it works out, I do shoulders just one day. Yeah. I have a day where I focus on my shoulders. But I don't do many front raises or front delt movements because I have a chest day. Yeah. I know I'm working at that. I know I'm working it when I'm doing my overhead presses. Yep. They're even getting worked a little bit when I'm doing my side lateral raises. Yeah. I mean, because your front delt's engaged the whole time. Yeah. And so I got to the point where, like, I'm almost overdoing the front delt by having one or two focused exercises of front raises to hit them. Now, I'll mix it in once in a blue moon just for the heck of it, but I definitely don't focus on making sure my front delts get isolated once a week, because I kind of agree. I kind of started to see, like, my front delt was getting more developed than my side or my rear. Yep. And it was because of what you just said. I mean, it was getting way more action than the rest of the shoulder was throughout the week. Yeah. And that's that like touches on something that I think is really important that a lot of people gloss over, right? Especially if you work out fairly frequently, right? Is the accumulative volume that you place on a muscle group, right? And so a lot of times when we go in, we're working chest, for example, we tend to not think about the other muscles that are working as secondary and tertiary movements. You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, your primary muscle group may be your chest when you're doing the bench press, but you're also working your front delt. Your front delt gets loaded up a lot. Your triceps get loaded up as well, So it's like all these things that we don't really take into account, and that's why, sometimes people are like, man, I don't get it. I worked chest yesterday. Why can't I do that much on my shoulders? Whatever, Well, it's because you fried your delts. When and your triceps. Yeah, exactly. Two of your big muscles that are going to help you do an overhead press are already beat from doing chest. Yeah, so I think it's important for people just to be more mindful. So going back to the beginning, when we were talking about the mind-muscle connection, right? Yeah. It's like being mindful of what muscles are working when you do certain movements, because that will benefit you long term too, because then you'll be able to understand how each of these muscles are connected. So when you're doing a certain movement and you're like, man, I noticed that this muscle also works this muscle, I'll use an example of one of my clients the other day, so she hadn't done we had to take a couple of weeks off of her doing certain movements and everything, because she had strained her quad, right, and her her lower back was bugging her, right. So we had to switch up a few things, and but then this week she was doing better, so we were able to throw back in some movements. So one of those movements we threw back in was barbell bent over rows. And the next day she goes, hey, she's like, I can't. She's like, I don't know why. She's like, we didn't do anything in legs yesterday. Why are my hamstrings? She's like, why are my hamstrings hurting? Well,
It's because the hamstrings help to stabilize your position when you're doing a barbell bent over row, right? Because it's like you're not working them directly, but they still have to work to keep you stabilized.
Right.
And so so for me, I kind of got excited that she noticed that and she was able to make that correlation.
Yeah,
Right? And I was
yeah.
like, yeah, it's because you have to stabilize, right? And you took a couple weeks off of doing that movement, and so now your body's like, hey, like, you know. And so I think that can be really beneficial, especially for people, if you're looking to go, like, say if you start off training with a trainer, right, and then you're looking to go off on your own long term, right. It's very important for you to start paying attention to things like that and ask questions. Like,
Yeah,
I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, ask me if you're not sure what we're supposed to be working here, where you're supposed to feel it, if you're not sure why you feel it here and there,
Right.
you're not sure why you feel something in your back, in your bicep when you're working your back, like, talk to me and I'll explain it
Right.
to you.
If we're doing barbell bench and you feel it in your back,
Yeah.
something's not right. We need to figure out what's going on with your form. We need to figure out
Yeah.
why you're feeling it, because you should never feel a bench press. Feel it in your back on a bench press. So
it's I'd say ask questions, like, that'll just help you to continue to make improvements, or like long term. It's like when you can actually, you're noticing what's actually happening in your body.
right. Right. So to get the wider shoulders, dumbbell lateral raises? Is that your go-to?
I would say lateral raises are definitely beneficial. And then also, so when it comes to, like I was saying, how everything's connected, right? So even when you get a wider back, it will kind of help the shoulders to also look a little bit broader too. So like that's where things start really connecting, right? But definitely some type of lateral raises. It's definitely important to do. That could be dumbbell, that can be cable. Now, kettlebell lateral. I've also done kettlebell lateral raises, and that's more of an advanced movement right there.
Yeah.
So definitely, get a good grip on dumbbell or cable.
Okay. So biceps and triceps for the most part is what we got left.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
So I would say for biceps and triceps, don't really overcomplicate it. I know there's 50 million different variations you can do. Choose some type of curl that you're able to do with really good form. Preferably, I say start off with dumbbells. I like using mostly dumbbells and cables. And it can be, whether you want to switch it up and you want to do regular standing dumbbell curls or seated dumbbell curls. The biggest thing is to make sure you're keeping the tension on those biceps.
Right. Form is everything.
Yeah, the form is everything. It's which one, the variation you choose. Comes down to which one you feel the most tension, the one that you're able to keep your form the most intact with. Because there's always, really with any movement, but especially with isolation movements, right? There's always so many different variations you can do, but somebody can do one variation, be like, hey, I can't really feel it, and then they can switch up and do another variation, be like, man, I really feel it,
Right.
Choose a variation, maybe choose maybe two different variations of a bicep curl to do. Like I said, my preferences are dumbbells, so a lot of times I like to do seated dumbbell curls because I can pinch my shoulders back against the bench to really stabilize, and I like to put extra tension on my biceps. So I like to do those, and I like to do cable, so I do lying cable rows where I'll lay back, once again, pinch the shoulders back, and then really focus on that tension on my biceps, and then when it comes to triceps, of course, you got tricep push downs. You can do some type of tricep extensions. Now here's one that gets that a lot of people doing it, and probably another more advanced movement, more so if you feel pretty confident on barbells. I would say a barbell incline bench press. So close grip though. So not a regular grip, close grip. So you won't be able to do as much as you would with a regular grip and everything, because the close grip puts more emphasis on the triceps. It's almost like doing a compound lift for the triceps. Now you're still getting some chest in there. You're still getting a little bit of front delt work and everything, but it puts a heavier load on the triceps. So I do incorporate close grip incline bench press quite a bit too. But if you're not, comfortable with that movement and everything, then keep it simple. Tricep push downs, cable overhead extensions, and then maybe I also like to do skull crushers, dumbbell skull crushers.
Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah, I prefer, for me personally, I prefer the dumbbells over the bar because for me, and I know for some other people, the bar like puts a little like too much stress on the elbow. So I feel like the dumbbell kind of frees up some range of motion, and then you're able to get that extra little twist at the top. So I prefer to use dumbbells for skull crushers. But yeah.
Okay. So, in general, over all these exercises, if you're trying to build muscle, 8 to 12 reps. I mean,
So
everything's building muscle, but as far as you're trying to build some strength and muscle at the same time.
yeah. So when it comes to that, I would say 8 to 12 reps. I would say like that medium, that mid rep range is a good like solid like right rule of thumb right there for most people. Now overall it's really a combination of like
Sure.
of both lower reps and higher reps, right? But to keep it more generalized, yeah, like the 8 to 12 rep range is pretty good. But at a certain point, especially when you're trying to, you're get stronger, at a certain point you are going to have to, focus on doing lower reps, like higher weight, lower reps and
some
everything.
days of
Yeah.
5 to 8.
Yeah. And then
But then it's also like you said, it's good to mix in those days where you're doing sets of 15 to 20 reps.
yeah.
I mean,
And
because
so-
your muscles are they're gonna feel that,
Yeah.
in a different way.
Yeah, so it's like just really being mindful of like where you're at in terms of like your progress and things like that. And then also I tell people like now a lot of it depends on, like I said, where the person is starting at, right? So if you are a pretty experienced lifter and all that, I say if you've stalled on your muscle growth or strength, one of the best things that you can do is literally just do something different than what you've been doing. So if you've been doing, like the 8 to 12 rep range and all that, it might be time for you to flip it and do like more like lower volume, higher weight, lower reps and all that, because maybe your body just needs a new stimulus. Because the whole thing about our bodies is that they are amazing at adapting, right? Like we are adaptation machines.
Yeah, and you're leading right into where I was wanting to go. Like, how important is muscle confusion? Because, I mean, it's not like you're taught that in your regular like high school classes or anything per se, and you're, I mean, unless you get with a trainer that knows what they're doing. I mean, that's just something that doesn't get talked about very much, but I think it's super important. Like 10 years ago when I started like more understanding. Okay, like just doing the same handful of exercises each muscle group every week on every day, like that's not, you plateau so much, your body adapts. I'm going up in weight a little bit here and there, but I need to confuse my muscles. I need to just next week every day needs to be a different muscles. I'm not doing chest on Monday. I'm going to switch it. It's going to be back and etc. And the exercises are all going to be different.
Yeah.
And the rep range.
So I don't like the idea of muscle confusion, and I don't like I think it's very misunderstood, and it's just something like a term that people kind of took in and ran with it, because you don't really confuse your muscles. Your muscles just adapt to stimuli, and so what is really going on, right, is that so you do want to have, it's a balance of having consistency with certain movements and things like that, but also enough flexibility to be able to switch things up when necessary, right? And so for a period of time, that's why like in training and all that, and it applies more so for like more as you get more advanced in your lifting and all that, there's cycles, there's, you have like your larger macro cycles, and then you have your meso cycles, and then you have your micro cycles. So it's like what you do, like the overall, say you might have a 6-month plan, which is your macro cycle, and then your smaller plan, like the meso cycle, might be like what you got to do in 3 months, and then the micro cycle is what you have to do in like 1 month, right? And so it's like you do this routine, maybe a little bit of variation and all that, but overall it's like the meat and potatoes are pretty much the same for X amount of time. And then at this point, there's where we start switching up some things, still switching up the stimuli a little bit more, then switching up more variables and all that, right? And so I think the reason why I have an issue with with the muscle confusion thing is because that people take that and they think that means that they need constant variation every single time that they work out, and that's just not true. You know what I mean? You need to have enough consistency for your body to actually understand what you're trying to do. Like your body, because our bodies don't necessarily like change, especially when it comes to muscle growth, because muscle growth, like having more muscle, is actually pretty inefficient overall. You know what I mean? And so like our bodies are like, I like to be comfortable. I want you to feed me calories and so I can stay safe. You know what I mean? I don't want to put on all this extra muscle because muscle is so metabolically demanding and it takes more energy to maintain it, right? And so I get what people mean when they say muscle confusion, but I don't like. But like I said, people take it and they run with it, right? And they think that everything needs to be constantly changed.
Yeah, I see, and I know what you're talking about. Some of those, like some of your influencers.
Yeah.
And then they're like, look, you should be doing these exercises, and they're just like off the wall, like super advanced.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing it exactly right, you're really risking injury.
Yeah.
And things like that. I agree 100% there. I guess. And even with somebody that's starting out, there's no reason to worry about muscle confusion or changing it up for sure. That is definitely more down the road. You've been working out for 6 months to a year. You have really good form because that's something you should focus on until you have perfect form.
Yeah.
And that weight number shouldn't really matter to you
until
you are experienced enough to be able to go up. But for somebody like you, I see you do a lot of different exercises periodically. I'm not saying you're changing it up every week.
Yeah.
But as you get more advanced, you just need to be self-aware enough to know.
No, you have to know when to change it up. But but for the majority of people, it's more so, even for really for anybody, right? But especially for the majority of people that don't have quite as much experience, you don't need to be thinking about muscle confusion. You need to be thinking about.
I agree. Yeah.
You want to be thinking more so about it's a foundational principle is progressive overload, or reframe it. I heard somebody frame it another way, which I love this. They said progressive stimulus, right? And so sometimes when there's 50 million ways you can change the variable of a workout, right? If you feel like you've hit a plateau, say on your bench press and all that, one variable, it's maybe start using more weight. Another variable might be to change the reps. Another variable might be your tempo. Maybe you need to start doing some negatives. Maybe you need to start doing pipe pauses.
Right.
Maybe you need to change up your technique a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to manipulate.
It's not just
variables.
changing the exercises.
Yeah, sometimes
there's so many ways
not.
you can change just that one exercise you're already doing.
Exactly. So there's so many different ways, whatever, to try, because the idea is to find a slight, and this is what I recommend for most people, right, is to find the simplest way to make a movement more challenging, make a simple movement more challenging.
Yeah.
And so if you've gotten better at for example, I'm gonna take it way back to when I started working out, push-ups, right? I got really good at push-ups. I am a beast when it comes to push-ups because that's almost all I used to do, right? So naturally, if I'm able to crank out 100 push-ups in a set and whatever, I need to switch something up, right? All right, so let's start doing some negatives. Let's change the tempo a little bit, right? So maybe I would do a 3-second negative and then an explosive on the way up. Definitely can't do 100 that way, right?
Right.
And so and that's going to trigger the muscle to respond a little bit different because it's now you're challenging me a little bit. So definitely I think thinking of it more as a way of okay, how can I progressively challenge the muscle a little bit more? The simplest way to progressively challenge a muscle is I think the best and most sustainable way to go. That way you're not, people don't fall into that idea of thinking they have to do 50 million crazy different exercises. And it's our bodies are simple. They're stubborn, but they're simple,
Right. And you can get, what would you say if somebody that's, what would you say is a good workout length? 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Honestly, if you're actually going in and you're doing everything you need to do and you're not just standing there we talked about this earlier, right? If you're actually working out, then honestly most people will be fine with 45 minutes to maybe an hour, if you factor in warm up time and stuff like that,
Right.
So you can get a good workout in
you don't need to work out for 2 hours.
Yeah.
If you're in there physically pushing yourself for 2 hours, you're really overdoing it because and this would be a whole nother discussion is recovery and how important recovery is, and giving your muscles time to fully recover so your muscles actually grow. Because if you start working them out too soon and they haven't recovered, you're just breaking them back down before they even got to build themselves back up.
Yeah. And I like that you brought that up because that's a really good point too to make because I think that a lot of people that are starting out, they get scared that they have to be in the gym for 2+. They're I just don't have the time. But it's no. You don't need that.
If you can do 30 minutes, but it's focused,
30 minutes of focused workout time, 45 minutes of focused workout time is plenty.
Yeah.
And then another good strategy for a lot of people that are having a hard time working out into their schedule and all that is micro workouts. You can do, like, if you can find 10-minute blocks throughout the day, you know what I mean? It will add up. It will add up. And there's actually studies that show that that it actually gives that even doing multiple micro workouts throughout the day has similar benefits to doing one single workout of the same length and all that. And plus, I think it's also good, a good way to, like, if you're kind of bored throughout the day, it's a good way to break up the monotony of your day, right?
Yeah.
And so doing, like, if you got time to go do a quick 10-minute workout at home, crank out some push-ups, crank out some squats, whatever, then, like, do that.
Yeah.
Do that.
We're all busy, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
But this term that I've used and heard, layering.
Mm-hmm.
If you're especially if you're just starting out, or if you're just really busy, and even if you're advanced, but take your business call on the treadmill.
Yep.
Take, do your work while you're on the stationary bike.
Yep.
Stuff like that. Listen to the book during your workout. The weightlifting book or the educational book, whatever. Layer your time.
Exactly.
So that way you actually are accomplishing two things at once. And I know that, like, you have the studies on, you can only really focus on one thing at a time, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But I believe that you can learn something or accomplish something like a phone call or, whatever, while moving your body.
Exactly.
And I think that's super important. And that's one thing that I'd really like, hammer home to people is I understand we're all busy.
Yeah.
Work, kids, all the commitments, I get it. But then, like, try to layer it, okay?
Exactly.
Try to be like, okay, I don't really have time to get into the gym 3, 4, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
But try and get to the gym twice a week, but go outside and go for a walk and do your business call.
Yep.
Or whatever that, however you can fit it in, layer yourself to where you're actually accomplishing more than just, oh gosh, I don't have time to just go work out. We'll accomplish two things at once.
Yeah. And I like that you said that because that's another thing too. So people say that you can only like really focus so much on one thing, right? Because it's the whole the multitasking thing. They're like they say most people are not really good at multitasking. However, if you're doing a lot of it depends on what the cognitive demand of an exercise of a task is, right? So walking for most people is a pretty low cognitive demand. Like we all can walk, we can sleepwalk. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like that's a good way to if you need to take a call, whatever, walk while you're doing that call because you don't need to think to walk. Right. But you're able to still get your exercise in. You're able to still handle your work. So something like that is great. And then another thing too is that when somebody gets more advanced and say when it comes to lifting and everything, I would say if you're new and if you're trying to listen to something that you really need to focus on and lift at the same time, it'll be a little difficult to really absorb the information, right? But the good thing about it is that as you get more efficient and you get better at the movements and all that stuff, then you don't have to think about the movements as much because it's yes, you still be mindful, but they become more automatic, so you're able to then you're even better at the
right, exactly.
And but the walking while taking the business call or work call or whatever, it's perfect because it's now you're still moving, and it's a low cognitive demand and you're able to get your work done,
Right, exactly. So.
Yeah, there's always little ways, like you said, the layering, there's always little ways to find ways to integrate your workout into your daily life,
Exactly.
And so some people will get walking pads, they'll do their laptop work on their walking pad,
Yeah, exactly.
So there's always little ways we can integrate movement into our days.
Exactly. No, sounds good. Thanks a lot, Khalil. I appreciate you coming back on.
No problem.